the surface. Timing is everything. Now, I want to give you some practical tools and things that will actually help you develop your eye to look at gymnastic skills a little bit differently. Um, so we're going to basically bring out some slides, I guess. Here I have a light orange arrow and a dark orange arrow. The blue represents a surface, and the black curve represents the surface moving. And so if you are the light orange arrow moving and hitting the surface, and the surface goes down, so you're going the direction that the arrow is pointing, and the surface goes down, you're going to sink a little bit. And the question is, how much rotation are you going to have on the surface before the surface releases you and sends you in another direction? And so understanding that, if you come into a surface down and you're traveling a little bit and falling, as the surface goes down, you're going to travel on the surface, and then when the surface releases you, you're going to be going in a different direction, especially if you're not going directly up and down. I'm just making up arrows to give you a visual. This would be the representation of a back handspring with the feet piking down and getting the turnover, so that when the surface drops, you're falling. You're like, I don't understand these arrows, Raleigh. They mean nothing to me. Yeah, that's pretty true. It's a weird conversation to have, so I'm going to dive deeper. So what we're really talking about is the block, and the words we use is late versus early. Okay, so the late block. It really comes down to where is your center of mass. I just used a green star to give the idea that that's your center of mass or gravity. I don't really know the difference, but there's your center. And if you look at the black arrow where the feet are, that's the pivot point. So that's when you're hitting the surface. So if you imagine this picture on that right there, you can see that the light orange arrow kind of represents the same aspect of the legs. If the surface drops down just a little bit, then the body's going to keep falling towards the ground. So we have direction of travel. This is like a back handspring. Pulling the feet under, letting the body fall to the ground. Okay, the down arrow lets you know that late blocks always send you back into the surface. So if your pivot point is on the opposite side of your center of mass, or basically your center of mass is in front of your pivot point, then you will be going back into the surface. All right, kind of key point to make up there. You got to pay attention to that. Late block, here we go, traveling forwards. This would be like a front handspring connection. When you're coming out, you need the feet to be underneath you because you need your feet behind you, but not just behind you. They need to be behind your center of mass. And that's a big difference there. Feet behind you versus behind your center of mass. And your center of mass then needs to be traveling in a direction. And because of the block, your center of mass will start dropping into the ground. This is how you make smooth, fluid connections without having the choppy, weird shape changes that come along the way. So, late block skills, rolling. Rolling falls into the ground. Running is a thing that falls into the ground. Handsprings, they fall into the ground. Whips. Whips are a kind of weird hybrid, but the fact of the matter is the whip is actually still going down. It's not going up. Giants. Now, bars gets really weird. So because the giant is actually traveling back into the bar as it rises, it's going actually back into the bar, and that makes it a late block, and that's just confusing. So don't worry about it. Hurdles should actually be falling into the surface, and that's the reason why a vertical hurdle, if it doesn't travel from the back foot to the front foot, if it doesn't fall into the surface, vertical hurdles can kind of slow you down. So it's more about the traveling aspect, the horizontal motion. And you will find that late block skills tend to be your connections, and they tend to be the things that travel horizontally. Then we get to the early block. Now, there's supposed to be a slide there. I don't know what happened, so whatever. The early block. Okay, so the early block is where your feet and you can see that black arrow by the feet, are in front of your center of mass. And who cares where the arm positions are? I don't know what skill this person's doing, but feet are in front of the center of mass, and early block sends you up, okay, because you're going to be traveling over the pivot point, and hopefully by the time the surface releases you, you will be traveling up. So that would be an early block. Early blocks. I think I should have had another, whatever. Early blocks. They're your back layout. They're your double layouts. And that's kind of interesting because if you look at the video of a double layout, you will see that the feet are actually behind, or basically the feet are in front of the center of mass, and then the body passes over the pivot point. But it's important to understand how it enters the surface. Switch fulls, any of those leaps, they're actually early blocks, which send you going up. And so if you struggle with going up, the problem is because you're probably doing a late block. Now, what makes something go early? Well, it's actually staying close or low to the surface so that you get your body contacting the surface before your center of mass gets a chance to travel over the pivot point. And that's what's going to make it an early block. So if you're taking steps into your leap, let's say, and you take small steps, your actually center of mass is actually going to travel over your takeoff foot that you're jumping off the floor with, and thus it's going to make it a late block. And that's why you have leaps that dive into the ground and do funny, weird things. You actually need to early block to make your leap better. Hitting a springboard, that is an early block. In bar circles, the snap action actually is sending you into the ground. And so you're actually trying to go away from the bar in an in-bar circle, clear up handstands, toe shoot. Now I know your toes are going on the bar, but you're actually going away from the bar. Standing back tuck, that's an early block because the hips actually travel forwards and your feet are behind your center, your feet are behind you. But you're doing that to make your pivot point, well, it just gets complicated. So standing back tucks, just trust me, it's early block. It goes up. There's a lot of weird shape changing that happens in a standing back tuck. That's really useless, and you should do standing pikes instead. So the story is, moving forwards, the story is that if you enter a surface, I'll just come back this way. If you enter a surface, the question is, how are you going to leave the surface? And if you want to go up, you need an early block. If you want to go down, you need a late block. If you're on trampoline, obviously you can connect things vertically. Trampoline works really nicely. But if you're not on a trampoline, then late blocking is usually the connection form preferred. Bars is weird, travel in a circle, so it depends on if you're going into the bar or away from the bar. And there's a couple other components, and blocking is only the first step to all skills, but it is something that you can identify in all movement pathways. And so it's interesting to correlate how a surface moves to how you enter and exit that surface. And it's also important to understand that the speed at which the surface moves will determine the difficulty of the block. So an early block on a tumble track is incredibly easier than an early block on a spring floor because of the speed of the surface. The tumble track actually moves slower, takes more time to travel a longer distance than the floor does. The floor will not travel as far, and it responds much more quickly. So in the sense, the response rate of the floor is faster. Trampoline moves incredibly slow. So if you use surfaces that actually have a slower response time, you can actually develop your entry and exit of the surface better, which is why trampoline is such a valuable tool to learn your entrances and exits on, because you can actually feel where you are in relationship to your center of mass. This later kind of comes into a problem when you try to teach twisting through horizontal tumbling, because most people don't actually horizontally tumble correctly, and then they're trying to twist. And twisting is all about being appropriately aligned to your center. So you need to know where your center is in order to be able to twist effectively, you could say. So if you're tumbling horizontally, which is downward action, it's a block that sends you back into the surface, and you're trying to learn how to twist, and you keep getting sent back into the ground instead of your twist rising. You feel like you're over rotating, or weird stuff is just happening. You can't stay attached. You're segmenting your body. Then it's probably because you actually don't know where you are in relationship to your center of mass. And that's a really hard thing to teach on a fast surface. So learning how to twist on a floor is a lot more difficult than learning how to twist on a tumble track, which is still more difficult than learning how to twist on a trampoline, which sends you going vertical and takes away the horizontal travel. And so by eliminating certain pieces, you can actually develop the athlete better, and they'll actually be able to correlate and just create a quicker learning curve. So there you have it, early block versus late block. Go look at it in all your skills. You're going to see this in limbers and how kids try to stand up. Now I'm going to put in something that you need to understand. If you're doing a handspring, it is the feet contact to the surface that is the block. It is not the hand contact to the surface, although it's just as valuable, the hand contact. The hand is not the block. So you have to understand that if there's a feet-hand connection, it's whatever's hitting the surface first that is the block. The second contact point is actually the stopping action, and that's the third step in what skills do. And to keep it, though, in a vision, if you're going to do let's say a back handspring, you want the feet to late block, and you do want the hands to actually late block, versus if you're to back handspring your Chenko, right, you're going to want actually the arms to early block onto the table, even though that's not the correct term, because they're not actually blocking off the table as much as everyone thinks they should be. But you need to understand how you're supposed to enter the surface and leave the surface. And if you're at that early angle, then you're going to go up. And if you're at the late angle, you're going to go down. And connective tumbling is best done down. So I hope that helps you figure out your problems. If you have thoughts on what this all means, hey, send me a message. Let's talk about it, because gymnastics is awesome, and so are you.